He's famous for political manoeuvring, yet Benjamin Netanyahu failed to cobble together a coalition government in Israel. Now, new elections will be held, the second in just 5 months. But will anything change? Can a new vote shift the balance of power? This is Inside Story. Hello everyone, I'm Kamahl Santamaria. Welcome to Inside Story. Well, he worked right up until the Wednesday midnight deadline, but Benjamin Netanyahu just couldn't make it happen. Nearly 2 months after the Israeli election, and there is no workable coalition, meaning the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, has been dissolved, and there will be another vote on September 17. That means 3 months of campaigning, of political uncertainty, and of course, no guarantee the next result will be any clearer. Now, we discussed the election result back in April on this programme, and we've got something special lined up for this edition. More on that in a moment, after this report from Harry Fawcett in West Jerusalem.
After a bruising final day trying to magic a last-minute coalition deal, Benjamin Netanyahu's face said it all. He'd failed. The Israeli parliament, at Netanyahu's urging, voted to dissolve itself and take Israel into an unprecedented second election in the same year. It's now his best hope of clinging on to power, but he insisted voters shouldn't blame him. The blame belonged to his former defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman.
It is just unbelievable. Avigdor Lieberman is now part of the left. He is from the left's bloc. You give him votes for the right, and he doesn't give his vote to the right-wing government. This is what we see.
Lieberman needs a secular party opposed to what he calls attempts to make Israel a religious state. He was insisting on the passage, unchanged, of a bill that would increase the numbers of ultra-Orthodox Jews being drafted for national service. The ultra-Orthodox parties, also a key part of any right-wing coalition, want the law softened. Lieberman held firm, and the coalition was doomed.
The Likud has failed in this task to form a coalition, to form a government. Together with their turn to the ultra-Orthodox, they bear full responsibility to the fact that Israel is now going back, once again, to an election.
Failure to form a coalition would usually put the question back in the hands of the Israeli president. He would then select a member of the Knesset, in all likelihood a different one, and give that person the chance to form a government. But these aren't normal times. Benjamin Netanyahu is facing pending indictments in 3 separate corruption cases. In order to give him the best chance of fighting that off, only the top job will do. Last weekend, tens of thousands took to the streets of Tel Aviv for a rally against Netanyahu's apparent attempts to legislate immunity from prosecution and ensure the courts couldn't overturn such a law once passed. With his first indictment hearing due in October, even if he wins the September election and manages to form a government, any hopes of ensuring immunity will be seriously dented.
It might make it harder for him, but he has capabilities, very strong power, high political capabilities. So it's not his last word for sure. He will try to maneuver.
Opposition leader Benny Gantz says the elections are all about Netanyahu's bid to survive prosecution.
This is all happening for only 2 words. Only 2 words. Legal fortress. There is no other reason here.
Gantz was mocked for declaring victory early on election night in April, but now it's clear Netanyahu's own celebrations were premature. The fight he thought he'd won 7 weeks ago has months left to run. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Just want to have a quick look now at some numbers, the kind which show us just how fragmented Israeli politics is and why Netanyahu couldn't bring enough factions together. Now, you've got, first of all, Israeli President, headed by the former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. It is a secularist, nationalist, far-right party. It has 5 seats in the parliament. You've got the ultra-Orthodox parties, and successive governments have needed their support. This time Netanyahu was looking for their 16 seats. 7 of those from the United Torah Judaism Party, headed by the Deputy Health Minister, Yaakov Litzman, and also the Shas Party, led by the Interior Minister, Aryeh Deri, with another 8 seats. Now, Netanyahu did manage to get them all on board, but differences between some of those parties, particularly over the issue of the ultra-Orthodox men in the military, meant a consensus just couldn't be reached. Now, we're going to do something a little unusual for this show. See, on April 10, which was one day after the election, I was sitting in this very same chair, and our discussion that day was about the result of the Israeli election. You can see it for yourself at aljazeera.com. It is called "What Kind of Government Will Take Power in Israel?" But seeing no government has taken power, we have decided to assemble the same panel from that April 10 show to try to piece together what happened, or indeed what didn't happen. And here they are. We're starting in Tel Aviv with Akiva Eldar, Israeli columnist at Al Monitor. In London is Yossi Mekelberg, a professor in international relations at Regent University. And in West Jerusalem, Barak, the CEO of Kivun Global Research and an advisor to the former Israeli President Shimon Peres. Gentlemen, welcome back to Inside Story. We got the band back together for this one, and it puts me in the position which a host loves, in that I can throw old answers back at you and we can piece this all together, basically. So, Akiva Eldar, let me start with you. A month and a half ago, you told me Benjamin Netanyahu is a magician. He can play the big hero and the master. He convinced Israel that he is the #1 diplomat. Well, it didn't work out that way, did it?
I was wrong. After all, even magicians like me can be wrong. And when it comes to Israeli politics, it is very difficult to even predict the past. I think that maybe the only individual in Israel that is not surprised from what happened is Avigdor Lieberman, who turns out to be a greater magician than Netanyahu. But let's meet again the day after the next elections, September 18th, and see what happens then. If Netanyahu is still around, and I believe that he's got very good chances to still be with us.
Well, believe me, I've already got the three of you penciled in for September 18. Don't worry about that. Yossi Mekelberg, let me come to you. You called Benjamin Netanyahu a very skilled politician. He knows how to play his audiences. In your opinion, what went wrong here? Or was it simply that the other forces were almost working against him?
You see, it's nice to know that I'm in good company. Akiva can be wrong as well, so I can get it sometimes wrong too. But, he's a skillful politician. But, I'm talking about magicians. Every Houdini reaches one lock too far, and maybe this is the case of Netanyahu here. But this was a unique set of circumstances, because in the kind of abnormal condition in Israel, you need really the skillfulness of negotiating with different parties, with different interests, and you somehow square many circles. But here there was something in addition, which probably beyond Netanyahu, which is his personal interest. And this time he had to overcome not only his political survival, but his survival out of court and out of jail. And this proved to be his weakness, because he concentrated probably too much on trying to weaken the Supreme Court, try to pass legislation that will grant him immunity. And he also forgets that after so long in politics, everyone, even if it been not only a magician but an angel, you build yourself opposition and some enemies in politics. And Lieberman is not an easy enemy to have in politics.
Barak in West Jerusalem, your turn. You actually said, I wouldn't call him a magician. You disagreed with the other two. You said, because there's actually no illusion or sleight of hand about what he does. You said, what you see is what you get with Benjamin Netanyahu. You also called him one of the most skilled leaders in the world. How is it then, similar question to Yossi, that one of the most skilled politicians in the world couldn't pull together a coalition in 1.5 months?
Well, he's one of the skilled leaders in the world, meaning he's still, even when he, gave his concession speech last night after the Knesset fell, he said, I have this whole, trilateral Israel, Russia, United States meeting taking place in Israel, which no one knew about. So on that framework, the international framework, I still think he's one of the most skilled people and has the best relationships in this world today with Putin and with Trump. where I think, we're seeing him, and the magician is really sleight of hand. It's not necessarily, he makes it look a particular way, but we've seen what I can say is typical Netanyahu. Having worked for the guy for 4 years, much earlier in his career, and then following him, since then, he operates in a certain chaos. He always waits until the last minute. There's a total mess that's involved. In Hebrew, we call it balagan. And then out of that mess, he gets everyone together. I mean, even now where he was playing people off of each other right up to the deadline, he still hadn't spoken to any of the Likud ministers. I mean, in the Likud, all of the Likud ministers and wannabe ministers were all in the dark up until this point. That's something you want to close before you swear in your government to make sure you have every single person on your side. And he didn't do that. And what he does is it creates a certain pressure among his Likud ministers to vote with him, among the other people. He likes to have these deadlines where he's forcing some compromise. Usually it works. He came up against Lieberman, who wanted to take this as an issue, and he was going to go all the way. And, having most of Netanyahu's nemesises in politics or enemies in politics are people that have worked with him. Kahlon, who had another party, Bennett, who had another party, Lieberman, who had another, who has another party. They've all worked with him, and they know how he operates. And you give him the chance of actually defeating him, sometimes he'll do that.
So shouldn't all this chaos that you described, Mitchell, and on top of that we can add the chaos of dissolving the Knesset and calling new elections, shouldn't all that sort of raise the question about whether he is the right person to lead Israel into another election 3 months down the road? Or is he almost a cult of personality now?
Well, I think, I think what Yossi said was correct. Meaning he put his personal interest here way above maybe what the national interest is. Because normally he could go back to the president and say he possibly needs an extension, some more time. He didn't want to chance it because he, thought there would be a game here where the president would say, you've had your turn, now I'm going to give it to someone else. And he was also afraid that it might go to someone else in the Likud. The most interesting thing that happened in this whole episode was Yair Lapid basically said to the Likud, they said, let's form a national unity government, anyone but Netanyahu. Pick whoever you want, and we're in with you. It's almost like he gave the keys to the bounty ship, to the Likud, to the engine room, and said, why don't you have your own mutiny? And they could have had a rebellion, they could have had a revolt, but they didn't. And, that's where the problem is with Netanyahu, is it became a personal thing where he said, if I'm not going to be prime minister, I'm going to go to elections. Again, he had a lot of options. He could have gone to the opposition, to the blue and white party, and said, hey, here's the government, let's figure out what to do, because it's not in anyone's best interest to go to elections.
All right, so Mitchell and Yossi have raised this issue of Netanyahu, the prime minister, the man, putting himself above the party and the country. Akiva Eldar in Tel Aviv, how much of that do you think comes down to the fact that I think it's early October, yes, October 2nd, Prime Minister Netanyahu is due to appear for a pre-indictment hearing over bribery and corruption charges? I mean, all of this happening at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it's a very interesting question, because I believe that many people who voted for the Likud trusted that Netanyahu was telling them the truth when he said that he's not going to ask for immunity and not play those dirty tricks of forming personal laws and fighting with the Supreme Court and doing everything to undermine the Israeli democracy. There are honest people who believe that democracy is above all in Israel, who hated what they saw. And I think that there will be pressure, more and more pressure from the constituency on the Attorney General to stop this madness. I don't have any other definition to what's happening. It's chaos, it's madness, and it's maybe something else that starts with a C. It's what Netanyahu is doing is corrupting the Israeli society. And I think that this is going to be the ultimate test for the Israeli constituency, to the Israeli people, and to the Attorney General. This was the first time that we saw the Supreme Court judge, the president of the Supreme Court judge, making very clear statements about the conduct of the prime minister. We saw more than 50,000 people last Saturday in a rally, and there will be more of that. So I think that there is a momentum. And if you ask people in the street what they think about what happened in the last 24 hours, they will say they want to see something else. And this is why I'm saying that I was wrong when I said that Bibi is a magician, because he was trusting, I think, a little bit too much. He went a little too far with his trust of his power and the need of the Israeli people to have a king.
Okay.
So I think that the Attorney General will get this message.
Yossi, your thoughts on that? Do you think the Attorney General will get that message? Because, and I think I actually asked you this on our last show, I think I said, shouldn't the issue of a Prime Minister being under bribery and corruption clouds, shouldn't that have been a much bigger election issue? I would suggest this time, especially with it all happening so close to the next election, it will be.
Well, going back to your earlier question, is he the right person or the wrong person? I think he's the wrong person to lead the country for so many reasons. Not only the corruption, but this is a major issue. He corrupts, as Akiva said earlier, the country, the political system. And obviously this weakness and vulnerability of him is for everyone to see. The minute that Blue and White Party said, we are not going to join you, a coalition with the Likud because of the allegations, it gave so much power to other small parties, because almost the natural coalition will be between the Likud and the Blue and White party, but this couldn't happen. If there is any courageous leader within the Likud party that is ready to say that the king has no clothes and there is time for change, and in the next election to let the electorate to go beyond or to think beyond Netanyahu, there is a great chance. But at the heart of it, going back to what Netanyahu said himself about Olmert, a prime minister can't stay in office when there's such a serious indictment and court cases against them, and the indictment, the potential pending hearing against Netanyahu are way more severe than there ever been against Olmert.
Let's go back to Mitchell Barak in West Jerusalem, who's been, you've been nodding away there. I think you're probably the closest to Israeli politics and the personalities and the people. Do you think that there is anyone, as Yossi described, who would be willing to put their hand up or at least to call Netanyahu out and say, no, we need to do this differently?
Not within the Likud and not at this point. Meaning, if you look at the history of Likud, it's quite interesting. Unlike Labor, which changes party chairman every 18 to 24 months, meaning basically since 1977, there's really been only 4 or 5 people who have been head of the Likud party. Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, Benjamin Netanyahu, he resigned, Ariel Sharon, and then back to Benjamin Netanyahu. Likud will stick with their leadership. They will stick with them through thick and thin. And the thing for Likud, they're still traumatized. Many of the Likud people, they're already second or third generation from pre-1977, when many of them were discriminated against, especially those from the lower socioeconomic sector, who are Sephardi Jews, Mizrahi Jews from Arab countries. Meaning, so getting power is really important. Maintaining it is really important. And many of them believe that Netanyahu narrative, which Akiva was talking about, which is corrosive to democracy, which is the media is controlled by the left, the court is controlled by the left, even the police are controlled by the left of center, the police, all of these things, the universities. Now, if you saw Netanyahu last night, who came on looking really worse than he's been before, almost like a wounded animal, what was the biggest insult he could say to Yvette Lieberman? He is from the left.
Yes. He
went to his voters and said he's from the right, but he is really from the left. Like, that is the greatest curse that you could say to someone who's a right-of-center Likud person. So he creates this fear of the left and was able to put it on Netanyahu. So they'll stick with him. Yeah. And again, he's always going to run a negative campaign, whether it's, for a strategic threat or from the internal threat. And he's putting himself at first by saying, they're trying to take me down. They can't do it in the ballot box. So that's why we have to vote and vote stronger for the Likud. And there is no one. Short answer to your question, there are many, many good and qualified candidates in the Likud that could take it over. given the chance, all who have more experience than when Netanyahu came in 1996, but none of them have the same kind of killer instinct that Netanyahu did when he came to take over the Likud, and none of them will do anything to rebel against Netanyahu at this point.
Interesting.
I
Okay.
Once,
go ahead,
once
Akiva.
The polls will show that Netanyahu is becoming a liability to the Likud and that they're going to lose in the next elections, maybe there will be a baby that one of them that will say that the king is naked and let's put an end to this. As long as Netanyahu can deliver the goods to the other people, who are, most of them are midgets. But there are some people like Gideon Saar and others, and once they will see, the polls will be very clear about it, that people are sick and tired of him, then perhaps there will be a revolution.
Final thoughts then, because we're starting to run out of time, but I want to ask about the opposition. Benny Gantz and his blue and white coalition, lest we forget, they got 31 seats in the first election. They weren't that far behind Netanyahu and Likud. Yossi, is this now a big opportunity for them to actually springboard, well, it's a springboard to go from and actually, pick up some seats here?
I think there are many within the Israeli political system that have the opportunity, which goes back to your previous question. I think anyone from the Likud that won't take this opportunity and to challenge Netanyahu, whether it's difficult or not, doesn't deserve to leave the country. The country is in a junction of history that they need courageous people to come and say what needs to be said about the future of the country on so many different issues. The same goes for the opposition. The blue and white is not a real party. It's a coalition of parties, and they are not even sure about whether they are going to run together and who is going to be leading this party, and they're going to keep the rotation. But yes, I think that the part from the center-left, the Labour Party together with Meretz Party, they should think what is the best way to gain and to create this magic 61 seats that they can actually lead the next coalition. But for that, they need to bring probably more people and convince, and most importantly, not to fight with the Likud party, not to campaign on their own turf, to actually present a real alternative, not in terms of personalities, but in terms of platform and ideology.
Final thought then, and this is looking forward, as we did last time, looking forward to this idea of an election in September. Is there not a risk that the Israeli public will get fed up with all of this and that A, they might not turn out to the polls as much, or B, they might turn out to the polls and the result will be even less conclusive, even more fractured than the vote in April was? Akiva.
Yeah, I believe, first of all, that the turnout will be much lower. First of all, this is a nice season. People travel. This is the high holidays in Israel. And the people that will show up, and this goes to your question about blue and white, I think that this will work more for blue and white and people from the left who will be more motivated to change, as I said before, to change the reality in Israel, to change the political map and to bring some hope and not to have more of the same. And I think that this can work against Netanyahu. And the other thing is that what we saw last Saturday is unprecedented. We saw the leaders of blue and white standing side by side with the leader of an Arab party, with Ayman Odeh. And perhaps this opens an opportunity for a coalition or for partnership, not only between blue and white, Labour and Meretz, maybe even some kind of an alliance with the Arab parties. And maybe this time the constituency of the Israeli Arabs will be more energetic and their turnout will go up.
It's going to be fascinating. The vote's on September 17, so gentlemen, I will see you on September 18, I hope. Akiva Eldar, Yossi Mekelberg and Mitchell Barak, thank you. And thank you for watching too. There is more online at aljazeera.com. Inside Story is in the shows section if you want to check out our other editions. We're also at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, on Twitter at AJ Inside Story, and I'm at Kamahl AJE if you want to message me directly. But from the whole team, thanks for joining us. See you again soon.